So in our second video on strings, we're going to be looking at string traversal. Now, traversal is how we will travel over. The word traverse means to travel across or travel over. How we are going to travel over a string, okay? Which allows us to kind of look at individual characters to do useful things with. So that's a plan for this session. So string traversal is how we are going to move over each letter of a string. As I said before, the word traverse means to travel across. Okay, so when we say string traversal, we're really looking at each individual letter in a certain pattern. Now, that pattern might be looking at the first letter, then the next one, then the next one, and all the way to the end. That pattern might be looking at the last letter, and then the second to last, and just going backwards. It might be looking at every second letter, or every third letter, or anything along those lines. So there's quite a lot of scope when we talk about traversal. This is not just simply looking at each individual letter of the string. It may be looking at certain characters as we go along. Okay, so there's lots of scope to do different things and solve different types of problems. We're going to start off with the most basic examples though. The first thing to realize is that every letter, every character in a string will have an index. The word index simply means a number where I can find it. So you can think of it like a house address. Okay, so you've got a house and it has a number, unless you're posh and got a word, but let's pretend you're not. So it will have a number, and that's how you will find where the house is. The same thing goes for characters inside a string. So in this example, I've got the word hello, and the letter H, the first letter, will have an index of 0. Now, these are always indexed with 0 as the first character. Okay, so this is very common in most programming languages. This is also common for arrays and lists and things like that. So it's something just to get used to, that we are 0 indexed. Then we have, I know, the letter O is at position 4. So the fifth character is actually at position 4. So effectively, it's always one less than you think it might be. So each character in a string has a position, and this is known as the index. The position can be then used to find letters. So let's say I wanted, for whatever reason, to get the letter E out. Well, then I'd have to say position 1, wouldn't I? Okay, if I want to get the second L out, I'd have to say position 3. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. Now we can combine this little bit of information to loop over it, because let's think about it. I might have a very, very simple loop. I might start off with a loop with a position of 0. Now why 0? Well, boom, first letter's at position 0, isn't it? I then might say, well, I'm going to go until pos, sorry for my handwriting, is less than or equal to 4. Okay, which is going to be our last lesson. So let's look at this idea, how we actually can use while loops, and also I'm going to introduce for loops for the first time to see how we might iterate over a string. So here I've got some text. Let's say I want to get one of these letters out. Let's say I want to get, I don't know, these two letters out here. Well, how am I to do that? Might go print text. Now, I'm just going to use the indexes initially. I'm fully aware that you can use a splice to get this, but that's going to be in a future video. So let's look at which position that is going to be in. So got 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so the I is at position 5. I'm using string concatenation to get the next one out. So text 6. If I run that code, you can see I get the letters IS out. Let's go really funky. Let's maybe make a different word out. So let's say I'm going to say him using these letters. Well, how am I to do that? Well, I need the H first. That's at position 1. So text 1 plus, well, I'll get this I out. Why not? Text 2. And then I want this M here. Well, let's count that through. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Position 9. Plus text 9. And hopefully that's going to print out him, which it did. So I can use these indexes to actually get individual letters out of a string. Now, that on its own isn't necessarily that useful. but I can combine this knowledge to turn it into a loop. Now, we've looked at counter loops before, so let's look at this again. So I'm going to start at position 0. Then I'm going to go to the end of the string. Now, I could counter each letter, but I'm going to cheat because I'm a little bit lazy, and I'm going to get Python to do it for me. So I'm going to go len of text. Okay, what len does is it counts the number of letters. Now, remember that this starts at 0. So the number of characters in my string, okay, and the position of the last character aren't the same number, okay? The position of the last character is always one less. And that's the reason I haven't put an equal sign in here, because I want it to stop at the end of the last index and not the number of letters that I have, okay? So we'll see what happens if I don't do that in a second as well. So let's say I'm just going to print off each letter, okay? So maybe just going to go boring on it, and then pos equals pos plus 1. So what this is going to do is it's going to print out each individual letter. So let's just run it first. Okay, so you can see it's printing out each letter going 1 on each line. So why is that happening? Well, as we know, if I use these square brackets and put a number in there, an integer, that's going to get me the position of that letter. So the letter out of that position. Okay, so like I did with him, okay, position 1 was the H, position 2 was the I, and so on and so forth. Now I could easily replace that with a variable, which is exactly what I've done here. And that variable's changing each time the loop goes. Okay, so it's increasing by 1. So initially pos is going to be 0, then 1, then 2, then 3. So what's happening? Position 0, position 1, position 2, position 3, position 4, and so forth and so forth. So it's just going one at a time over each single letter. Let's see what happens if I change that pos plus 1 to be pos plus 2. Now I'll get a very different output. So let's see why that's happening. So the first letter it prints out is the T for this. Then I'm adding 2 to it. Well, 0 plus 2 is 2. So it's going to skip over the H and it's going to go straight to the I. And you can see that was my next one it printed out. So I'm going to add 2 to it. So it's going to skip over the S and print out this space. Then it's going to skip over the I, print out this S. And you can see that's what I was getting there. So I can go over this in a different way. Let's say I want to go over backwards. Well, how am I to do that? I might start off with len of text minus 1. Remember, the last index is always going to be the len for minus 1. Then instead of saying pos is less than length of text, I'm going to say, well, it's greater or equal to, greater or equal to 0. Like this. Then I'm going to keep this line the same, and instead of plus 2, well, I'm going backwards now, so I want to subtract 1. So I'm going to do a backwards loop, effectively. So if I run this, I now get all those letters going backwards. The last thing I want to show you is an alternative way of doing this. Now, let's say, instead of having to, I want to go over each letter individually, rather than having to write out each individual line, and using a loop, what I can do is do this. I can use a for loop. So what for letter in text, print letter, and that's it. And I get the exact same output as I did with my loop. So this is using something inside Python known as an iterable. Okay, so because it's a string, I can go over each individual letter. It's known as an iterable. And what this will do is say, okay, when the first loops, the letter becomes the first letter inside that iterable. So effectively, it's the same as going letter equals text 0. Then the next time it runs, it's going to do something like this. Letter equals text 1. Letter equals text 2. And so on and so forth. But it does all this kind of stuff for you. All you have to do is do whatever you want to do with that iterable. Okay, so for loops you'll see a lot more on the internet when you're using text and string manipulation. Okay, so that's the reason why I've decided to introduce it here. So here I've got a for loop which is printing out the letters backwards. Now it looks very different to the last for loop we looked at, and the key difference is I'm using this command called range. Now what range does is it allows me to kind of create a range of values, a range of numbers, which I can then iterate over. So let's see how this range command works. I'm going to create a second loop. So for a in range, I'm going to put two numbers in, and then I'm just going to literally print the A out. So I'm going to run this, and you can see it prints out the numbers 0 to 9. So what it's done is created a range of numbers starting at 0, ending at 10, but not including 10. So it's effectively like saying less than 10 and not less than or equal to 10. Okay? So it does not include the 10. So this first number here controls where the number range starts. Let's say I want the number range start at 5. I can change that to 5, press run, and you can see it now has 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. There's a third argument to range, which allows me to control what's known as the step. Okay, let's say I want every second number. I might put a 2 in there and press run. So I've got the output 5, 7, 9. So let's look at the reasons why. Well, it starts off with the number 5. We're now going to use the step value, which I add 2 to it, so 5, 6, 7, which is why I get 7 there. And then add 2 more to 7, which gives me 9, and that's the reason 9 comes up that way. Let's say I want to go backwards. Let's say I want to start at 10, end at 0. I want to go backwards in ones. I'm going to have my start at 10, my end at 0, and I'm going to go -1 each time. So there you go. You can see it produced the values. Now, as you can see, it starts at the value 10 and stops at 0, but does not include 0. So let's say I wanted to start at 9 and include 0. I'd probably do that. Let's say I've got some text. Let's call this word. It's got 2 letters in it. So my starting position will be 1. My end position is 0 because I want to include that. But remember, it's you have to go 1 more because it doesn't include it, which is why I've got -1 here. So I'm getting the values 1 and 0. So 1 will give me I, 0 will give me H. But I will need to actually display those letters. So I'm going to use the word and treat A as an index. So when I run this one, you see now I'll get I and H. So let's come back to our original for loop. And now let's actually look at this in a bit more detail. Well, my starting point... That wasn't helpful, was it? We have bells in this school. Anyway, a starting point is the length of the string, -1, which is why I've got length of text -1, okay, which gives me the index of this letter here. I then go to -1 because my last index is 0, but I want to have to go 1 more than that because it doesn't include it, which is why I've got -1 there. And I'm going backwards, which is why I've got -1 here as well, which gives me that. If I want to go over every second letter backwards, I can go -2 there, and you see that gives me a different output there. So hopefully that's given you a little bit of an insight of how we can use the range command in a for loop. So time for a task, okay? So what I'd like you to do is to enter the code on this screen into Python. And then I'd like you to run it to see what the output is. Once you've done that, have a little read through it, make sure you understand what's going on, because what I then would like you to do is add 2 more words. Now to do that, you're going to need 2 more variables. So at the moment there's 2 words placed into 2 separate variables. You need to create 2 more, okay? One with the string range in and one with the string house in. Then you're going to update line 6, the print statement, so it also prints out the letters of range and house as well, okay? You're going to use the same pattern as is currently there, okay? The output you're aiming for is on the screen as well, so you can see there all of the words are printed going downwards, and that's what you are going to try and achieve as well. Okay, so have a go at that. I'm going to pause the video. I'm going to go over the answer in a moment. So here is the answer to that challenge question. So you can see I've added two new variables, word 3 and word 4. Okay, and I've put the strings into those variables. I've then adapted my my line, print line, so it has plus word 3 pos plus word 4 pos. I'm following the same pattern. So each time this loops, it will get a single letter out of each string. Okay, so word 1 pos will get the first letter of word 1. Word 2 pos will get the first letter of word 2, so on and so forth. When pos increments, when we get to line 9, pos equals plus 1, pos becomes 1. So then it's going to get the second letter out of word 1, and the second letter out of word 2, and the second letter out of word 3, and so on and so forth. And that's why you get the output that you saw on the screen. So hopefully you managed to get that solution.